of that portion of the expense. The total support was maintained at the total amount of $716,106, which is the total amount allowed under the financial incentive agreement. So we just wanted to bring this to your attention. We're happy to create a motion if you feel that's necessary, or this could just be an informational only update related to this minor change.
I don't think we need to change it.
Yeah, but thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have blight parcel inventory for community enhancement. Paul Falk.
So as we had Scott give an update on Operation Take Back last week, talking about different aspects of this initiative, that the one thing was the property inventory, and I recall Councilmember Alshire always saying this is something that we needed to do into communities. And we've done this in the past with community enhancement, which was the last time we did it on a full larger scale was in 2004. It's been done pretty much from the 1980s up until about 2004. Now it's just kind of been spot as needed, and just usually by property, not by an area. As doing the Operation Take Back, the initiative would be going to this area, but then as this shifts across the city, as Scott had mentioned, we would go through each of these areas doing the property inventory, where we would be informing the property owners of things that are basically owner-occupied or commercial properties. As far as any vacant property or rental property, they would already be underneath one of the programs that we already have established. So this would be addressing the blight of basically owner-occupied properties or commercial properties that have been let go. To do these ones, we created a flyer that I can certainly pass around. There will be so many edits to this thing. That's why there has not been an opportunity to get it in a packet beforehand so that we could get this to everyone. But the community enhancement flyer that we would give out first, this would go towards the property owners, like I had said, and the commercial properties that would be done door to door. If they were home, we would certainly give it to them. If not, we would certainly mail it. These are the same standards that all of our properties are to be maintained to in Hagerstown. This is what we inspect all of the rental and vacant properties to. So it's just kind of giving everyone just an idea of what we'd be looking for. And then on the back side of the flyer, we included different ways that they could get assistance through any different agencies that would be able to provide it. Because our history has found that a lot of times people don't want a blighted property. They don't want something that is deteriorating in their community. They want to be contributing as much as possible. So maybe they just can't afford it. They don't have the ability to do it. We put together these, working with our Department of Community and Economic Development to come up with the different programs that are available for people to apply for to get assistance. That would be like our first round, that we would go out to everyone and administer these flyers. It doesn't always mean that someone would actually take the initiative. It just kind of means that they got information and they're like, oh yeah, I'll get around to it, but they might not actually bring their property up to a standard that we want to see in our community. The next step would then be where we would go door to door, and we would be given a door hanger on their property, and we would identify the areas that would not actually be meeting the property maintenance standards in Hagerstown. We would check off the box and again just kind of let them know what it was specifically. Again, sometimes it could be very minor, sometimes it could be something major, depends on the situation. On the backside, again, we would provide all of the different assistance that they could get in the community to provide them with incentives to make those repairs. And that would be 30 days after we did the initial flyer, so it would be given some time. And then after that, if initiatives were not taken by people of making the repairs, going through all the proper steps, then we would eventually go to notices, because these are things that these properties are a blight in the community. We are trying to get them resolved. We would have to go through the process of actually issuing a notice and seeking a court authority to make any repairs if needed. Now that's very long down the way, but we have to issue a notice first to get to that process. So the goal is to try to educate them for 2 months on what they could do on their own initiatives, making their own applications, and then at that point we would move forward with notices if we weren't seeing action taken by the owner. And at the same time, while we're doing these owner-occupieds, we're of course doing the rentals and the vacants in that area. It would be a joint effort to do all of those inspections in that community at the same time so that everyone was held to the same standard. I will say back in 2004, I was here at that time when we were doing those inspections, and people were like, that we would have a rental property owner saying, what about this owner occupied beside me? Or like, they received information as well. And the owner would say, what about that rental property next to me? They got the same information. And we actually saw a lot of work going on at that time because everyone was held to the same standard while we were going through an area. It did make an effort. So the goal is that we would have a policy basically outlining what sections of the code that we would use, which is basically on the door hanger, that is going over just basic lawn care, sanitation stuff, and then also general care of the property as far as the exterior goes, windows, doors, walls, that type of stuff. Any accessory structures as well, like fences and things of that nature. But it would be a limited scope inspection that would be just solely for community enhancement purposes.
Don't we currently notify individual property owners if we receive a complaint from somebody in the neighborhood?
We do. We will issue a
We already
notice.
do that.
Yes, yep. This will be more of, trying to take a whole area and trying to bring it up that some of the residents have been seeking, that we've been meeting with.
How effective, when you do notify the homeowner that they're not to meeting the standard, does it get repaired?
It all depends. Right now, it's more spots. So if someone complains saying, my neighbor has chipping paint on their house, we would go out, verify that, talk to the owner, explain what options they might have, and then they would move forward with actually fixing up the property, but it takes a nudge from the city usually to get to that point.
I know that there have been, there's a local church and another couple individuals that are interested in doing some repairs in a kind of a nonprofit type of environment. So you and I had talked about it, my goodness, years ago, it feels like at this point. So, I agree. I think that the education is key.
Education is key.
Absolutely. I really love that part of it. And I would imagine that the reason why that a lot of these are in this condition is because of affordability and overwhelming and, just not easy. So I hope that we can use those, between the church. I know Takesha has been talking with the same church actually, and the gentleman, the Blight Busters that we had talked about. So rather than, making it a cost
Right.
to the homeowners, or at least as little cost as possible.
Yeah, I worked with Jonathan and Ashley over with community development, and they helped a lot with the different programs that would be potentially the best available for our residents in Hagerstown they could be more larger ticket items. There's always other agencies, like you'd mentioned, that we could always refer to people as well. Just our goal is that, it makes my life easy if we go up and down the street and there isn't any code violations, in all honesty. So that if we can work on working with everyone to get these properties up to the minimum standard in Hagerstown, that's the ideal goal.
And we have staff to be, we have staff to be able to pay attention to something that, this is a big project.
It is, and I've talked to other jurisdictions, and actually one of the inspectors came from another jurisdiction, that you all work together as a group for these areas, and you assist, everyone works together so that you don't overwhelm one person, that you work as a team to address the issue.
So I see both sides of that. I do agree as far as cost. We do live in a fairly poor community, and I think we need to be cognizant of that and make sure we have all the resources available to help them. With that said, we also have some pretty serious issues in our neighborhoods too, and I think now is the time to start enforcing things and improving our quality of life, because our community wants it. We hear it every day. We saw it in the survey. We saw it when we do on foot tours through some of the blight in this community. I know we've all been talking about blight for the 5 years I've been sitting around this table somewhere, and I think it's time to start enforcing and beautifying our neighborhoods. So, but I do think we have to be cognizant of cost, but we have enough resources in this community. I think we can come together and make it happen.
Yeah, I think using all of our resources, that we have, there are people out there that are willing to do the work to help, and I think that that's important for us to note.
And blight aside, just from the look of our community, we also don't want people living in unsafe conditions either. And there's a lot of that right now, unfortunately. So I think it's time to
Yep.
step it up.
I did meet with the Landlord Association just to get their feedback on what they felt with this type of initiative, just so that, you know, because that's one thing I get from landlords all the time. Where are the homeowners being held to the same standards as us? Because they have a lot of concerns. They appreciated the education effort that we were putting out to try to educate all the homeowners first before we went to any type of notice. And we're actually going to be modifying our notices to make them aware of the rental rehab grants as well, that that's at the bottom of any notice we give to a landlord, that they could be aware of what they could receive as well. So trying to work together, just, you know, we have the money. Let's see if people can start using it up.
We have the money.
Yeah, for some of these.
Oh, right,
programs.
right, okay.
Yep.
If you qualify.
If you qualify, and that's
Right.
what's clearly identified on the back of the area that's subject to eligibility and funding availability. It's all on what's available, but sometimes we have it where I'm sure you see with Invest Hagerstown, we have to shift funds around at times because people don't utilize it, and especially on the rental rehab is one of them. So just, let's start getting some of these people starting to apply for things as well.
Gotcha.
And you'll be,
So,
go ahead,
oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
So as we saw in the survey, people want us to beautify our communities and hold people's feet to the fire, I guess. Unless, you know, you're the person whose feet are getting held to the fire because you have chipping paint on your downspout and you're being cited for it now. And even though that chipping paint actually doesn't affect the safety of residents or pedestrians or motorists,
So insurance agent in me says otherwise, because it is a burn risk, but
so chipping paint on the downspout, different burn rates
it's a burn risk.
on a metal piece.
The
Okay,
insurance company would
I
tell you the
got
same thing, just.
All right, well,
Same. I agree chipping paint is probably the last of the concerns on the list. I mean, people have chipping paint. It is a burn risk, but, you know, some of the other issues I believe are probably more
Some of
important
the
than
things we saw,
than
chipping paint was not an issue.
listen,
Yeah,
listen,
Missing
I do
windows and
not
missing
doubt-
doors and.
I do not doubt at all, because I've been in those neighborhoods too. But, again, I'm all about education. I'm all about the availability of grants and things like that that can help people if they can't afford to do those improvements. I am not about this. So, you have me right up to that.
Oh,
know?
for
Can you
the policy
clarify?
for us to
Yeah, what
follow.
are you not about?
You have me right up to this. And then,
So you're not in favor of the ordinance?
no.
Or it's a policy for us to follow for inspections.
Gotcha.
And so.
Okay, so for
'cause-
the
'cause
enhancement process, you're not okay with enforcement after 90 days or 60 days?
Fines associated with that enforcement, which is what that'll be. Because that's exactly what we do to rental properties now.
Correct. We,
And now we're gonna do it to people who actually own their own property and may not fall in the guidelines to take advantage of, you know, these funding mechanisms that are available. So, again, and I'll go back to, and, you know, and I was around in, you know, 2001, when the first referendum about the landlord registration vote happened. You know, and I had a conversation with then John Lestitian about, you know, back then even, we currently had laws in the books. But we were gonna forgo all those laws and we were gonna move to this, laying another level of government on top of it. But you know, my problem is that when you're an entity who's enforcing these things, and yet your own properties that you own suffer from some of these same effects, I think you need to police your own first before you police other people. And I mean, I could probably go out here today or tomorrow when it's light enough anyway, and take pictures of some of our properties that have peeling paint. You know, again, police our own first, then we can worry about everybody else. I like the educational aspect. I like the fact that there's availability for individuals who qualify to get help. I don't like the punishment of people who own a property, who are living day to day, trying to make it, but don't fall in those guidelines of assistance. And there's a lot of those individuals out there.
There are, and the challenge lies then when we're dealing with the neighborhoods, then when that neighborhood leader's coming to us and saying, why aren't we doing anything with that property? And the only recourse I have is to take them to court. What should I do at that point then?
I guess that's, maybe figure out an alternative. I mean, I don't know what that alternative is, but, you know, I mean, there's, and don't get me wrong, I mean, if there's, you know, if there's commercial properties or abandoned, we all know there's abandoned properties, and a lot of these fall under that abandoned property, okay? Those are different animals. Those are individuals who walked away from properties and did those kind of things. Totally different. These are people who live in their house, who do the best they can day to day, and now we've got the brown shirts coming around and, you know, citing them for chipping paint on a downspout. So,
I know you've done a lot of research with other jurisdictions. I'm just curious what they do for homeowners in other jurisdictions.
This exact same thing that I put out in front of you all, that they do door-to-door campaigns, making people aware of things, and educating, you know, the general population on what is available to them, and then they do the same notices to their residents.
You know, PCAT does a really good job of taking a property like from the before and after, like in the Facebook pages and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if there could also be some kind of way to encourage by looking at what a homeowner has done that maybe got some educational material and almost like a story in order for that to be a contagious reward-like recognition type of system. So then it really just encourages the other neighbors. And I agree with Bob, is that, you know, finding these, you know, individuals may be a little tricky. I agree with all of it up to that point also, to maybe look at it from a different perspective. And, you know, doing the education, going door to door, the flyers, I think that that's I love that. I think it's fantastic. But I think that the fines may just get a little bit, just a layer too much. But again, if we do that encouragement, and with PCAD doing some storylines and some, you know, really great celebration of what it could be and how they got the funding, and or how they got the nonprofits to be able to help, Day of Caring. I mean, there's tons of opportunity to get the properties fixed up if we are allowed to do that.
I mean, I think that we have a fairly robust level of ordinances of enforcement currently that we can employ for any property in the city. I mean, no different than any other jurisdiction. If a property is brought to our attention, or if we are actively seeking a property that garners such attention, we have a protocol in which to proceed through to address the obvious egregious issues, both, you know, physically, aesthetically, you know, et cetera. I mean, we have any number of ordinances that exist to do that. So I think that, and for me, like, I support all of those. You know, I think that's a necessity. It's a necessity to have those on the books for those times that regularly occur that you need to use them to apply corrective action to a property that warrants it. I think for me, when I see this, and maybe when I hear it in my mind, and when I hear my respective members talk about it, like, I think it would be great to send this out into the netherworld of the community and say, hey, we're trying to improve things. We're trying to be a better community. We're trying to be a more appealing, pleasing, neighborhood network, community here. And we need you to buy in. And I think that the absolute way to not get the folks to buy in from the outset is to initiate that desired partnership with a handler. Like for me, I'd rather just send it out and say, hey, and you could send it to my house. I mean, there are clearly things on my house, if you went there right now,
100%,
that I
I'm
could
with you.
say, you're
Mine
probably
too.
gonna find one or two of these things. And I get it, and I'm working my tail off to try and raise a family, work a job, and keep the property as in good order as I possibly can. And even help out my neighbors that need help, to do that. But there's things that I just can't get to all the time in a readily fashion that I need to. And I thank you for the reminder, and I'm gonna try and do better. I'm gonna try and be better about it. And maybe we just try that approach first and say, hey, that's what we wanna do. And I think that speaks to that we send the flyer out and we say, we're trying to lift this ship, are you on board with grabbing a rope and helping? And then we take a year, and a year from now, we come back and we say, okay, how did that work? We evaluate and say, are we seeing the change in the neighborhood? Because when we go into these neighborhoods, and I've said this before, as you pointed out in the beginning of your presentation, you're going to find things that are in our own house within those neighborhoods, our own infrastructure within those neighborhoods, that probably have a need for some of that attention to detail as well. And I think we're all going to have to be sort of voluntarily on that ship first, before we appear to be immediately identifying that everybody's a culprit. And I guess for me, I'd rather take a year to create that positive initiative, and then a year from now say, okay, now there's real culprits. We've said to everybody, we really want to do this. We come back a year from now and we say, okay, there are truly culprits out there, that just don't have any desire, not a single modicum of interest in being a lifter of that ship. And at least at that point, we know, we've tried that reach out process, and you know what, the carrot didn't work. And I think you will. I think you'll find that 50% of the people are already doing it, and I use these equations all the time. 30% of the people would like to do a little better, and 20% of the people just, you know what I mean? It just isn't gonna happen. And whatever that ratio is, you're gonna narrow that down, and you're gonna find that. And I don't want to be in this position of creating a program and an approach that offends, frankly, the folks that are doing the lifting, already, or turns away, the folks that will engage and say, yeah, you're right, I can keep my trash cans in the back, I can do these things, I can,
What's the next conversation we're gonna have is trash cans. But,
all I'm saying is, you know what I mean, and I don't wanna turn those off, with that first hand that I extend being one, that slaps them on the back, and then come back and see, see how that works out.
So,
Sorry, I also don't want to get too much focus on issues like chipped paint or a missing spoke in a deck railing or something. I think what we really need to look at, and what we've seen on the walking tours, at least the mayor and I have been on, are areas where it is a life safety issue if something is not remediated, regardless of whether you own the property or not. Like what Paul did a presentation on the decks. If during one of these reviews, it is seen that there's a deck that is in serious jeopardy of failing, something needs to be done. Whether if that person can't afford to fix it, that's where we can then step in behind with one of these programs or potentially some ARPA money or something that we can set aside. We're not talking millions of dollars here. We're probably talking thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. But somewhere where, some amount where we can help them, assist them in getting that fixed. Chipping paint, those kind of things aren't gonna kill anybody.
I just don't want us to be coming back. I don't want us to give the impression that, hey, want to let you know, we really like you to do this. By the way, we'll be back in 90 days to make sure you did. Like,
No, I
feel
don't
like
think that's it.
I feel like that's like a next year's
The,
step.
the
not-
only time I would really think we would want to do that is when you look at something and say, man, that porch is about to go, or that roof is about to go.
Or there's 3 missing windows, like we saw on Cannon, where there's kids living in it, and
Yeah.
they're poking their head out of broken glass. I mean, that's,
Well, and that's the thing, I mean, could we do a blanket approach with this flyer to the entire to all, and then maybe more attentive in the door hangers to some of these properties in the
We could-
neighborhood that,
Sure, we
you know
can
what
put
I mean?
them in
Like, let's say,
utility
like,
bills, sure.
everybody gets this-ish, and then the door hanger goes in that specific neighborhood that we're trying to festers. correct?
I think it's a great idea, and again, this is not meant to be a punitive exercise. It's not meant to be a
I know
punitive
it's not meant,
exercise.
Scott.
And it shouldn't be communicated that way. This is a life safety thing. To me, and Paul and I will disagree on this, chipping paint, yeah, looks crappy. It's not gonna, chances are, unless you're eating the paint that's peeling, nothing's gonna happen to you. If a deck falls, somebody's gonna get hurt. If a porch roof falls in, somebody's gonna get hurt. You know, if you're living with windows that aren't in or falling out or whatever, that's not the way you should be living. If you can't afford it, let us help you find a way to get that fixed. That would be the spirit of what this is trying to do.
then I think if
And
we're
I
gonna,
understand your pessimism, I understand that.
if we're gonna take that approach though, and take the approach that Councilman Oshire thinks we should go, and I agree.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be a big campaign, you know, big on marketing campaigns, but I think, just like we did the community cleanup day, hey, get involved. You know,
Absolutely.
let's find a solution to this. Let's do this as a solutions based, like, here's the information, here's what we expect. You know, let's get everyone on board and fix
Yeah.
our neighborhoods up. And you're right, a year from now, if that doesn't work, then we could,
I think a
this
year from now,
conversation again.
for the 15 properties
It's
in
some-
a
yeah.
5-block area that, you know, don't want to get on board, yeah, we need
There's a little more
to take
enforcement.
that
We need some
enforcement
teeth.
action.
Correct,
We just
Yeah,
teeth.
yeah.
I'm
But
first
we
to say
have-
that.
We have laws in the books for that.
Now,
We can inspect every single property in the city of Hagerstown to these same standards at any given day. There is nothing that says that we're not. What I was proposing to you was just a limited scope inspection for areas that we've identified as that the neighborhood residents have raised us as concerns.
I know that's how you, listen, I get it, I do, and I know that's how you view it, okay? But I'm telling you, when this is received from the people in that area, it's not gonna feel that way. It's gonna feel like they're coming to get us, blah, 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 they're gonna fine us, they're gonna, you know, so let's try the carrot before the stick for a change and try to figure out a way to get everybody on the same page and involved.
And that's fine. We can educate with those. I would just ask.
And
this-
educate that area, I
And,
mean, you
and
know.
all I would ask from this body is to support those efforts, because when those residents are complaining about issues that, you know, would come up, it's like, well, we're trying to incentivize them first for a
Right.
period of time
Right.
beforehand, because the residents are going to complain to our department saying, why aren't you doing this? Well, we're trying to
Well,
work
they're
with
gonna
them.
blame us too,
Right,
buddy.
Yeah,
because
I
that's
know,
ultimately where
but-
this originated from, is from the conversations we've had with the community.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like a
I-
mini day of care
Listen,
campaign.
you guys do an invaluable job that, you know, when you're trying to protect, the citizens in the community, of Hagerstown. I get it, and I applaud that, but I'm just telling you, from a layman's perspective, a regular old person, this reeks of, you know, an iron fist. And I know that's not what you're portraying, but that's what they're gonna see.
That's fine.
So let's
We
try to
can-
figure out a better way, let's put a glove on it, and figure out how to make it not hurt so
We
much.
can educate for periods of time and see where that does and go from there. That's fine.
Are you guys good with that approach?
Yeah, Kristen, I think, said
Yeah,
it
I
a lot
just-
more eloquently than I ever could.
Yeah, I just don't, I mean, I think of my,
That's no surprise.
and I know he's gonna kill me when I say this, and you probably can't hear it while he's watching anyway. But I just think Eddie down the street was 90 years old. I don't, like, I just think about, he's in a neighborhood, you know what I mean? He's 90, and, you know, he owns his house, like, what's that first communication look like? Like, I just put myself in those shoes and say, okay, you know, here's a guy that, you know, isn't sort of like, you know, into the neighborhood and doing all this, like, what's that first communication look like? And it, you know, it can't be, you know,
Yeah, can't be a
overbearing.
stick.
It
Yeah.
can't be overbearing and confusing and, you know what I mean? Create an additional level of anxiety, you know? So I just try and think about it that way.
I can put a
And when
cover
we're
letter
talking-
with these flyers and put them out into
And,
the community
you know-
and tell people to call me. I mean, that was the same thing that we did with the deck education, it's call me. I didn't say call our general number, I said call me so that I can answer your questions.
When you're talking about owner-occupied properties, you know, like it or not, you're talking about a lot more seniors, frankly, that are likely in that category that have long-term ownership, you know, of those properties. It's just a reality, and so I just want to make
You
sure.
know, the one thing that sticks in my mind from probably 15 years ago was a phone call that I got from an old man on Fairground Avenue who got a letter from code compliance because someone sprayed his garage out back with graffiti, and it was a fine letter. It wasn't a, hey, here's some ways to remediate this. It was a letter that says that we were gonna fine him. I mean, here was a guy who had lived there all his life, you know? I mean, and that's how people view it.
Honestly, Paul, this flyer, rather than a cover letter with these resources on the back, is perfect.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's absolutely
is a
perfect,
great
and it
flyer.
is
I mean, you
very-
probably need another rendition.
Graphic
but-
portrayal of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna
Just the
change it again.
stuff at the
But I mean,
bottom.
it's just less, it's just like, hey, let's get on board, and just like, you know, the mayor said, it's really like a campaign that we can all get on board with and be able to help in specific areas, so, this is very well done. Very good, very well.
All right, up next, we have the trash remediation.
All right, so next with trash, this is the one topic that if our office receives several calls every single hour, it seems like, about
dear.
someone not storing their trash properly. When we were doing the Operation Take Back and we're walking with the community, we have, I kept on hearing trash. And when we go out to areas, you know, we're looking for what is in violation of the trash. Now, sometimes it's always interesting because we get calls and it's the day after collection or the, you know, or the trash collection's behind and they're like, they didn't pick up anyone on the street. And it's like, well, no, they didn't pick up anyone on the street. I don't know what you want us to do with that. They're running behind. So it's trying to take that initiative, but then we have these problem properties that always come up, that are repeat offenders that just don't take initiatives. Either the property owner is not taking an initiative to address the issue, or the tenants or the occupant just don't care and just store things out there, and this becomes a neighborhood's bane of existence essentially at this point, that they no longer enjoy seeing that trash at that location because now they're just overwhelming the area. And then when we're walking through these areas, we're seeing a lot of bulk items that are being set out for trash collection. Of course, we do not take. We're also seeing that the trash cans are just continuously stored out there, which in some communities, as Scott had mentioned last week, that they just don't have another option to store them. In some of our areas, there is just not another option. And then also, it is litter. People like to say trash, and that's where I always got confused because they would just say, well, there's trash. And you go out to an area, well, it's litter on the street. It's not trash. There's not something specific to the trash ordinance. It's specific to littering. So one of the things that, this is a policy that we've had in place for several years, actually, with our office, and we've done them with different problem properties. It's more or less kind of making you aware of the policy that exists. The abatement fee that we added into city code was in 2016, that gave the city the authority to go ahead and address these issues through a process. Essentially, the process is that it's a first-time offender in a 6-month type of thing. We're educating them, and in all honesty, this is mostly with a landlord-tenant rental property. This is not generally with owner-occupieds. We're making them aware that this is the trash schedule. They might have set it out on the wrong day, weren't aware of it. We tag it. We'll make contact with the residents if possible. Sometimes we will stick the door hangers on each of the doors in the residence to let them know if it's a multi-unit of what their actual trash day is. The second time occurrence there, we will issue notice of violation. We'll post it on the door, and that does go to the owner as well, because we were trying to let the owner know, look, you're having a trash problem here. Where we've been at continuously is that we just stay in that second occurrence time period, but because each time something happens, so let's say that someone sets the trash out and has a large accumulation of trash on the sidewalk, we issue a notice for that, trash comes along, collects it, and moves on, that's a non-issue. Or that, they corrected it, it moves on, we don't have any more violation. But 2 weeks later, they do the exact same thing, and every 2 weeks, they're just continuously setting out large volumes of trash and not correcting the issue. And this is where we get a lot of the complaints from properties. So, and we always take each issuance as a new violation, that when something happens 2 weeks later, that's a new violation. Another 2 weeks, it's a new violation. So now we're trying to say, okay, within 6 months time periods, that after this point, if it's your third occurrence, now we're starting to look to penalize you, that it's a $25 fine. And then we're actually going to take the trash as well and send you the fee, or send you a bill for taking that trash off of the property. It's $5 a bag for those items and $25 for a bulk item. That's been in the budget book for several years with those. So it's just saying that at this point, we're doing it. We've done it very rarely, but walking around with the residents in these communities, they want to see more aggressive action to try to correct these repeat trash offenders. And of course, then on the 4th and 5th and 6th times, the fines go up, and of course, we're still taking the trash at that time. The one thing that was proposing with this, that if we want to move forward, that there would be another fee for us picking up the loose trash on the property. That would be the littering that just accumulates on properties, to eventually get that off. Although some of these neighborhood residents are looking at litter campaigns of trying to pick up it, that we do have repeat offenders or areas that it collects that we're constantly just sending notices to, saying you got litter on your property, can you get it cleaned up? And just going out and picking it up. After so many occurrences, again, after the third occurrence, we're picking it up, and it would be our office that would go out, it'd be the inspection staff picking this stuff up, and there'd be a fee associated with that. So that's what this proposal is. It's basically kind of making you aware of the policy, but we're going to be more aggressive with this, as this is what the residents in the areas have been asking for.
Yes, please.
Question on the, have we ever looked, I know we looked a couple years ago down here at picking up behind, and, have we looked in other areas where the same kind, like over the south end where some of that same situation occurs, there's any possibility of picking up behind in an alleyway as opposed to a street?
We had talked about that. In fact, during the walk, we went down an alley to see if that could be an option. You really see it here on South Locust, the unit block of South Locust, where everything is so close together. There are no even niches to put trash cans. We have thought about that being an option in those types of areas. We haven't pursued it until after this discussion, but it is definitely an option that we could talk to the contractor about doing.
Well, and don't get me wrong,
That's the only, for some, that's the only alternative.
yeah, it is. And, I see places, even up in the West End.
Yep.
Where there's just no way, unless you're dragging that recycling dumpster
No.
3/4 of the way around the block to get it
Yep.
to, out of sight. I mean, there's just no way to do it.
Yep. That's
And
correct.
I just think that if, and I'm not opposed to this, Okay.
And let me.
So you know,
Yeah.
but I think there may be some alternatives to,
Yes.
you know, to this also.
And-
I am opposed to the management reserves and rights direct deviation from, or make edits to this policy in whole or in part at any time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's if we don't issue a fine for someone there, because they'll be
Ah,
saying it's
I
the third
got you.
time, and it's like,
So-
no,
so
hold off
maybe
on
the
the
other way,
fine.
okay.
Yeah, it's a hold off
I'm
type of
probably
a
okay
thing.
with that.
Yeah, and with those, it wouldn't be on trash can placement usually on these things. These are the improper set outs of trash always being on sidewalks. The issue is trying to eliminate that hazard.
The
I waited
problem
all
is-
week to get a little orange sticker on my lawn clipping debris because they didn't pick it up last week, and I left it out there. I'm thinking, okay, they're gonna come by, you know, they just are late last Tuesday, or last Wednesday when they should have picked it up, but it's still sitting there. So I put some branches in it this time to make it look like there was, because I guess the rain beat it down a little bit. Maybe they didn't see it when they just thought it was an empty trash thing, but, so I put branches in it to make it look like there was something.
Write that down, Paul.
Well, I get to put it out tonight, so it doesn't matter. It's already out.
Just circle Mealy Parkway.
But yeah, I mean, I think we need to try to figure out a way. And I know that we got rid of our trash collection years ago, to save the taxpayers' money. But I think if there's a possibility that even if we had to have our own in some of these areas where alleyways
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
that we get a truck down where maybe,
There are definitely several areas, especially in the more densely populated places down here.
I could have swore we took a
Yeah.
tour.
We
I
did.
think if we're gonna explore that possibility, we should also explore having uniform trash cans. I know Kristen's
Yeah.
been saying that forever, but I know we have them for recycling, but for actual trash, I think it
Yeah.
would be worth exploring. I know it's a pretty hefty cost, but it definitely does look better.
We could probably use
You got
it.
Rodney's attention.
I know. He knows how I
We've
feel
studied
about
the
this.
alleys in the downtown a couple times, actually.
Right.
The problem is the trucks can't get down the alleys, or the parcels don't always go the whole way to the rear.
Yep.
But there could be other places in town, residential areas more than like the downtown, where that could work. We could
So
study
there's some
that.
places up in the West End
Right,
that benefit from that.
yeah.
And
I
maybe
like
it
the
would-
idea of
and
having
probably
trash
on the
cans
south
downtown.
end,
I think
too.
that's a great
I think it
option.
looks a lot better than.
It would give
what-
uniformity to the look
Yes.
of the trash.
It ultimately comes down to the fact that if you live in one of those places, it would be real nice if you had to keep your trash can on the sidewalk or next to your place, that you kept it neat. That was the continuing theme we heard from the folks in the Bester community was the fact that, they are trying to advocate that we understand you don't have anywhere else to put your trash, just put it neatly. Don't let it overflow. Don't just chuck it and, see if you can make it into the trash can from the porch, those kind of things. Ultimately, that's what we have to work on.
Are you guys good with the proposal?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, ARPA funds.
Okay, it was distributed, thank you, Councilmember Martinez, for distributing the ARPA listing. And this will be added to the information online this week. What we have here are 34 maybe, projects that are in no particular order, are in no particular priority, but have all been, at least initially, provided by either staff, the mayor and council community survey, so the responses from the community on issues that they see in the community, your strategic planning session initiatives you were interested in seeing taken up, stakeholder input that we've received through regular meetings with not only individual organizations, but also the Homeless Coalition that we meet with pretty much every week, if not every other week. And then our grant committee, our city grant committee, and staff meetings. We've also had a couple discussions with Congressman Trone's office, not just on ARPA funding, but also on alternative funding for a lot of these projects to where we could focus ARPA money on those projects that may not fit neatly into another funding program that the government has out there, which there are hundreds of them and billions of dollars out there still available. We also understand, and I heard in a U.S. Mayor's Conference this afternoon, that the infrastructure bill will be voted on Monday in the House. We would be hopeful that we would receive a significant amount of money towards infrastructure projects, water, wastewater, roads, parks, bridges, all of that, those type of projects. So we're hopeful that that goes through. Also, we're hopeful that the $500,000 that Congressman Trone has got in the budget for blight removal would also be additional funding we could use for some of these projects. Those monies are not incorporated in here. Again, these are just project listings and information that we've gotten back from those that have submitted information to us. One thing you will not see on this project listing are many broadband projects. That's simply because there is so much broadband money out there for a multitude of initiatives that we would look at that funding first for any broadband project we would want to undertake within the city and hold ARPA off for anything that doesn't meet. We are going, I think DCED staff and myself are going to meet with the two broadband companies in town on Thursday and see what initiatives we could partner together on to help city residents have better access to broadband, not only for family use, but also for any upgrades and for their property that they may see, such as alarm systems, camera systems, those kind of things. So that'll come on Thursday. In the interest of time, I won't step through every single one of these, because what I would hope we would be able to do in October, in early October, would be set aside some time to where this would be the only discussion we talk about. This list is only dealing initially with the 10.2 million for this first year. We know that we have 20.4 over 2 years, so what we would hope is that we would pick or that you all would decide on your priority for the first 10.2, and then we would either move some of these into the next funding, or we would be able to generate some other money. We would certainly have other projects that would be able to utilize the second half of the 20.4. Michelle is also here because this list was originally done before we knew what the revenue loss calculation was going to be. Michelle has since done that, and it's best if she explained what that means versus effects of COVID, compared to revenue loss money, and how that affects some of the things on this list.
So August 31st, we had to file our very first report with the IRS regarding this money. And one of the things we had to do was put in the information for revenue loss. And with the revenue loss, the IRS had a separate document. It was almost 500 pages. That would list all the types of revenue specifically that could be included and what types of revenue we had to exclude. So it was a very long, tedious process. Two of the largest things that we are not allowed to include when we look at revenue across the city, and so maybe I should back up just a step too, because one of the things we were hopeful to do was look at individual line items on our revenue. We knew hotel motel dollars were down, we knew admissions and amusement tax were down, but the guidelines said no, we couldn't do that. We had to use city-wide. So then we went back to all the definitions and everything that could be included. Electric and anything under the electric fund, for the most part, had to be excluded. Again, not per the city, but as determined by the IRS. Same holds for the water side. No water service charges of any kind could be included. Nothing that we do with any of our internal service funds like our workers' comp and health insurance. And there's a whole host of other things. So I was very surprised to do this calculation. We have to do everything according to fiscal years, but for this calculation, we have to change everything to a calendar year, January through December. And we were at approximately $3.57 million of a revenue loss. I'm saying all of this to tell you when we come back in another 2 months and report on fiscal year '21, and we say, hey, the city has some surpluses in different funds. The reason why we can still end up with the surplus when we look at everything compared to this revenue loss is that the IRS generously decided that if you look at everything on a calendar year and only those items that can be included, they were going to automatically allow a growth factor of 4.1% in revenue. So even though our revenue for the calendar of 2020 was not below our base year, we actually had some growth. We weren't at a 4.1% increase, which is how we resulted in a $3.57 million revenue loss. With having a $3.57 million loss, we're able to do other things and use this, and we did come back and included a couple of items on this list that typically won't fit in any of the other categories. However, we can't do a big project with this. We can't put it in fund balance. We can't, there's a whole lot of things we can't do. So it has to be something that we are spending on what they define as a governmental service, operational type things. Hopefully that helps. And so that was for December of 2020. We'll have to do that same process again through December of 2021. And then just real quick also, while we're kind of taking a step, one of the things that was previously approved was a grant coordinator position, which was a temporary contracted position through December of 2024. Very happy to say that candidate has been selected and has tentatively accepted, and so we're hoping to have that person here and start October the 4th, which will be tremendous. Can't wait.
Awesome.
So one thing, just to make sure everybody's clear on, is the revenue loss of 3.7 million?
3.57.
3.57 million is not in addition to the 10.2?
No.
It is part of the 10.2.
But we can use it for operations.
We can use it for anything, anything we want to.
As long as when they finally send the report out, we can, within their definition of a governmental service, put it. So one of the things you're gonna find on the list.
Like a
and one-
pension, we can't boost our pension program
No,
with
it's
this
not.
money.
But one of the
Those
things,
kind of things.
one of the things that we're hopeful that we can do is, in October possibly, come back, a fire ladder truck. You know, we were looking at having to bond a ladder truck. And we have an opportunity with this much dollars to go ahead and possibly use ARP funding, so that will save us that much money in a bond, so that we can bond a larger project.
So what
And there are some other ideas in here.
Yeah,
If you
there's- yeah.
look, they'll say underneath, they'll say federal, they'll say revenue loss,
Yeah, and
some smaller things.
And as we go down through this list, I don't wanna take tonight and like start debating individual projects yet, or for you all to start deliberating on, that's what we need to do at another time. Because a lot of these projects, we still need information on, and we're still working, there's still an ongoing effort to do that. But how we separated these out are on the specific criteria that the interim final rule says we can spend the COVID-affected money on, and that's behavioral health, affordable or emergency housing, reemployment and entrepreneurial efforts, improving quality of life, helping government agencies to service customer needs, and infrastructure improvements to serve the community. So the projects that we have in here, some of them where you see the gray, they've all kind of, they may have been separate projects, but they've kind of all coalesced under one major topic. For example, under assistance with behavioral health issues, the Youth Violence Prevention Program is one of those that that would fit under being able to fund here, to find a partner and be able to implement. The second is the 24-hour crisis center, of which there were several items underneath there that all coalesced into that project. The accreditation costs for service providers, expanding availability of counselors, as detox crisis beds, mobile crisis nights and weekends, the outreach coordinator position. All of those could be coalesced under that one 24-hour crisis center. You see Potomac Case Management put in a proposal that would help them with a payoff on the Fennel building. It's now called the EM Tobias building. And they would be able to take that funding and put it, they would be able to take what they would not now be spending to pay a mortgage on that property and put it back into their client needs and their behavioral health influence in the community. You go down into affordable emergency housing, establishing a year-round homeless shelter. A whole family center was another project that Community Action Council put in, where it would be a location that would have all service amenities for the homeless in one large location, which would mean housing, would mean community, be medical services, behavioral health services, all of that into one facility in town. Not necessarily in the downtown, but close enough to where folks would be able to get to it. You look at reemployment, and that was where we had talked about creating scholarship programs or funding for CDL licenses, social work certificates, and AA degrees, CNAs through those accreditations through HCC, but then also to be able to provide those people the opportunity to do that. You help them with daycare, you help them with transportation. That could also be part of the funding that would be provided there under that category. And there are, as I said, there's 34 of them. We can't go into all of these today. It's going to take some time to go through them. We also put on at the far side of the spreadsheet, when we looked at these, the should do's, the can do's, and best done by or with others. And we did identify some of these that we could immediately say, hey, here are things that we should do. Here are things that we could do now that are possible to do now. And here are projects that we might be able to do with others. That again was based on the initial information we had. And we're still working through this as a group on these particular projects, but pretty much where we were at with this listing is we don't want to add any more at this stage. Unless it is something that is a true community need that you all identify, that is not on this list, we don't want to add any more. I think we've got enough right here, certainly for the 10.2, if not going into the next cycle of 10.2, but also I think it also provides us the opportunity to look at some of these other funding, the rental assistance, to bring back the porch assist, the front porch renovations, those kind of things. Those are things, and those are projects that we could potentially find other money with the help of Congressman Trone's office. That we've already had one meeting with them, and they have provided us some great information on other grant opportunities to be able to fund some of these projects, and then go forward with them once we have this meeting to get your all's priorities and thoughts. We think we've got a good mix of infrastructure and social programs based upon what especially we saw in the community survey. We do identify under the infrastructure improvements several things that are in the CIP program that we either continue to bump out into future years because they simply don't make the cut for that current year, or that we just don't fund at all because we know we couldn't afford to do it. Some of those are on the IT side. We've identified those in here too, and I would ask, and I can talk with the mayor and the city clerk about getting a day to where we could just, whether it be in this session or whether we have another session like we had strategic planning, and try to work on this list and tell us what to do with that. Even if it has to be an evening, we could do whatever would suit y'all's ability to do it.
That's good. You guys have any questions?
I do. Well, not question, maybe more of a comment. And, you know, I just pulled up there's actually 12 eligible areas that are detailed and elaborated within the federal final rule. I think it's final now, after July 26th or whatever it was.
It was supposed to be, but I think they still have it
No, they
listed as
still
interim,
haven't-
they still have it listed
Yeah,
as interim on
it's
the
not gonna
website,
change
but they
much.
listed it as a registry. They've
I mean,
changed it.
they're gonna lose interest in it, the further from it they get. And that's just a reality. You know, and the funding's gonna get handed out, and the checks and balances are going to be what they are, to the degree they have interest in it. And so for me, a couple of points. The first is, you know, and I appreciate the chart, but when it says here, source of idea, and it says mayor and city council strategic session, I want to make sure that the public understands the mayor and council haven't had a conversation to put this item in a chart.
That's correct.
So, you know, when I look at the 12 eligible criteria area, and I see something like Potomac Case Management with a $4.7 million ask, which I'm adamantly opposed to, the first question I have, and so I look at it in these two ways. The first question I have is, there are 600 plus nonprofits in this community, right? And so for me, there are about 5 listed in these different charts in different given areas. So, I mean, I think that when you're provided that federal funding, that you have an obligation to ensure that you're providing a clear, fair, and equitable opportunity for those nonprofit entities that have been impacted during the pandemic period. Because if you go to the initial, or if you go to the, I'll call it the summary purpose of this federal funding, it's to address the need identified during the pandemic period and forward. And so when I look at this, you know, it's difficult for me to understand, you know, how Potomac Case Management as an individual entity sort of gets listed, you know, on a sheet like this before 600 other nonprofits, you know, are sort of given the opportunity and awareness that they can get on this sheet.
But okay, let me address that. They submitted a proposal. We asked.
Just into where? Like into who and under what guise?
When we met as a group, the mayor got agencies together in this room, and we told them, if you have needs or you have programs that you are looking, that you would like to have funded from your organization, submit those proposals to us, and that could be included in a list that would be evaluated by the grants committee and by the mayor and council as to whether it would facilitate funding through ARPA. These are the ones that are on here, the ones that submitted their proposals.
So,
The only people in the room, I called a meeting 6 weeks ago with the executive committee of the Homeless Coalition and the Health Department. And we got everyone in the room and said, how do we fix what is happening in this community? Because it's very obvious when you go to any part of our community that we have a pretty big issue on our hands with homeless and substance use issues. So we had asked the executive committee of the Homeless Coalition, that's been in existence for some time right now, how do we bridge these gaps and all come together to solve these issues? So these were some of the proposals that they submitted with their ideas of, in a perfect world, here's how we would solve these issues.
oh yeah, I mean, if I was able to come to that meeting and ask somebody to pay off my building,
Sure.
I certainly would.
Right.
All I'm saying is, so if I take the example, Frederick County. So right now, we're vetting the Frederick County example, you know, in that area. And what they do is they have a sheet and say, hey, you know, here is the nonprofit COVID pandemic period assistance or relief assistance grant funding process. That's it. So they set and say, if you're an agency of X amount of size, you can ask for up to X amount of dollars for X amount of purpose during X period, right? And then they vet that process in a fair and equitable manner that allows any nonprofit within that community that has been impacted during the pandemic period to submit that. And they have a very similar grant process for impacted businesses. And all I'm saying is, I want to make sure that when we sit down to have a discussion, and I hear you say that we're not interested in having anything added, I appreciate that. The difficulty I have is, now we've had this discussion tonight in a public setting, you can bet that any one of us are going to get communicated to by some organization or some business out there that's going to say, hey, how did you already put this list together? And why is the impact that I've experienced during the pandemic period now not eligible to be given consideration?
And that's fine, it would be able to be given consideration. Where we don't want to add any more to this list would be for those that we've already worked with for the last 4 months on this, that have had that amount of time to be able to get their projects in. If they've already submitted things like CAC or Goodwill Horizon.
You mean nonprofits?
Nonprofits.
I know when you say we, you mean like the couple of nonprofits that were included in the process.
Well, there were more.
It's not even really that they were included in the
Yeah.
process. They were included in a conversation of us going, how do we fix this problem? Because
Right.
it's
Oh, I
getting
got
really
that.
bad in this
Right.
community.
I
And
hear
if there
that.
are other nonprofits out there, which is why I said if there are others that want to get added through, if they contact you or contact us and want to have a project funded, we could add them to the list. More like the ones that we've already dealt with, the CACs, the Goodwill Horizons, those.
So,
Don't want them coming back and saying, oh, and hey, by the way, we want to add this. Now that opportunity has been stopped.
no, I mean, I feel like we've definitely through this list covered, because if you go to the federal rule number 1 of the 12 has a subset of about 12 items, and we've definitely sort of hit that nail on the head, but there's also a section, it's called Assistance to Impacted Industries, and it names the hospitality, et cetera industry, and so I don't see anything to that effect on a list like that, and so I'm trying to figure out if there are these 12,
So I
areas,
And
why isn't that one that's added to the consideration process?
And I think what we did was, we all had a bunch, and when I say a bunch, we had a significant amount of notes, all of us, from the strategic session that we had with mayor and council back in, I think, November. And we went through a lot of the different ideas to see if there was any way any of them could potentially be funded in any portion under ARPA, and we included them on here. Then one of the other areas we did was, yes, you could do it for all nonprofits, and I think more the conversation that we had was, and I don't know if we left it on this list at the bottom, was that we didn't do a whole campaign and open it all to nonprofits unless that's going to be a priority that this group identifies. Instead, one of the biggest problem areas that all groups were saying was more immediate, that didn't have all these other buckets and pots of money. So there's lots of monies for nonprofits in many different ways under ARPA funding. There's lots of monies, just like for broadband, and there is also that same thing for some of these impacted businesses. And some of them are very repetitious of what already occurred with the CARES funding. The one thing that wasn't covered, and the one thing that I heard in a lot of seminars, and I think, to be fair, both Scott and the mayor probably did too, was on the behavioral health side and how much of a crisis that it was, not just here, but nationally, and that it was one of the areas where everybody, before the rulings become final, one of the areas that it wasn't necessarily, how much money did you lose, but different, the overdoses that have increased, the services that need to be done. Because it can't be done by one organization, it has to be done in partners. I think the behavioral health side was listed in that manner. And then, again, in the hopes to bring this list back, add whatever we needed to add, but also to come up with the priority listing from this group. Because one of the things we said was, do we really say city infrastructure, although water, wastewater, stormwater is definitely hands down an eligible category? Do we say that that is the number one priority?
Well, and I
And
don't-
we all kind of,
But I don't know if it's about priorities, and I just use this example that just came to the top of my head. When I look at an entity like Potomac Case Management that gets on the board asking for $4.7 million, and that's a pretty large figure that just sticks out like a sore thumb, right? But they are a regional entity that provides services on a very regional nature, that bring the service need into the community to some degree to provide that regional service delivery. And I get that, I accept it, that is the animal that it is. However, during the same pandemic period, and I use this example off the top of my head, I certainly have had no conversation with them, but the first thing that comes to my mind is, hey, let's take the volunteer fire company that serves the city of Hagerstown, right? That's out there, and I believe they have a debt on a building they pay back to us, right? So for that 15-month period, they have had absolutely no ability to do fundraising. And all I'm saying is I take an entity like that provides a direct, tangible service to the citizens of this city and say, hey, wait a second, here's an entity that's a nonprofit that provides a direct service to the citizens of Hagerstown, that has a building debt, that has to do fundraising. Like, I look at that and say, that's nowhere on this list, and I have to wonder to myself,
He's on the agenda on October 5th.
like, at what point it is? And see, like I said, I have no idea about that, but to me, I look at that and it's sort of like a glaring omission to say, that might be an entity that, and I only say that, and I'm just gonna be open and honest about this, you know, we had that experience, you know, in Myersville, where we're attached to the fire company who have sat empty for a year that haven't been able to do anything, and so that's why that item pops into my mind, and I say, you know, how do we vet those dozens of nonprofits that may be able, or not even may be able, are likely going to, you know, have a need as it applies to the service level demand for city citizens.
When you talk about somebody making it on the list, everybody made it on the list. If a proposal came in, they made the list. And then that list is what we go by when moving forward as to whether if that comes off the list, it comes, you know, that's your prerogative that it comes off the list.
You know, for me, I'm saying I don't have a list right now, at all.
And I hear what you're saying about nonprofits, there are 600 of them. I think for this purpose, it was strictly focused on behavioral health.
Right.
And I just wish that this first one would, because I like the general stuff, I just wish it wouldn't include anybody specifically.
Oh.
Like I think
Oh,
of,
okay.
like I think of like Hark.
Yeah.
Like Hark should be involved in the conversation because they represent like 30 churches that exist in the
Right.
city. I don't know which
And
one
they
might
work.
be interested or might have a need.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want it to list
Oh, okay.
anybody.
I get that.
I want there to be some equity approach to say, hey,
I-
there's the issue, you're right, it exists, you know.
Right, and that
I
was the
think-
intention of the meetings originally. It had nothing to do with this money or anything
Right.
else. The intention of the meetings originally was, how do we solve what we're looking at in Central Lot every day? Because this can't continue. You know, I mean, people are hurting and we need to figure out how to solve it. So that was the intention of the meetings. And then it evolved to, okay, if money's not an issue, if we have this separate pot of money, how do we fix it?
I also-
What do you need?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I also want to make it clear that these were not 34 projects that just generated out of my head or Michelle's head or somebody, that there was some genesis of what the genesis of that idea was. If it came out of the strategic session, so be it. If it came out of the community survey, we could put it on here. Or if it just came out of our heads, it came out of our heads. That was why that was there. I understand where you're coming from on that now.
And we wanted a comprehensive list of anybody, even if it was internally before we got to this point, we wanted a comprehensive list, even if we're saying no.
Right.
Because quite frankly, we still want to have those, we still want record of it. We still want, like with these, there's meetings, there's minutes, there's documentations that's going to go behind all of it, including public meetings. And then once, and this is just a working list. This is just trying to get
Yeah.
something together. What type of categories would it fit? And I'll be honest, for me, number 3, maybe the description, it doesn't necessarily fit.
Yeah.
But,
And I don't mind that part. Like I said, for me, it's when I go to page 2 and I see supermarket neighborhoods, which I think is a good thing, I don't want to see the assumption that Horizon Goodwill is listed as getting $1.4 million.
No.
Yeah, I
I
know
get it.
that's not the case.
I got you.
But, and
Gotcha.
it may not be them at the end of the day that is the entity that achieves that
Gotcha.
goal. We're just saying that is an effort that we could accomplish with that, and there may be, there's a
Right.
mechanism we need to discover for that.
Gotcha.
But it should definitely be an equitable process
Yep.
of, getting there.
Yep, gotcha. And I can also tell you, addressing your other comment about, the tourism, the hospitality and whatnot, we again tried to come up with projects, and we tried to advocate, folks to give us projects that did not have any other sources of funding through this whole thing. Tourism, hospitality got, a ton of money out there. Rental assistance, eviction, a ton of money out there. And we heard that from Congressman Trone's office.
Right.
But that's when they said, put everything down so that if we have alternative funding that we know there is a ton of money left for, we'll direct you there.
And I appreciate that, and if they did, I understand, but for me, I look at the hotels that we have within our community that we clearly recognize are functioning differently than hotels. And they're in a catch-22 where they either function the way they're functioning to keep the lights on, or they function differently, because they have a sudden, ability to a revenue stream they didn't previously have.
Right.
And, that to me, I don't want to name a specific hotel, but I think there should be some program created whereby if a hotel needs that and can use that funding to then reinvigorate being a true hospitality, destination, location, and we can help that occur.
Yep,
Then
good
I think,
point.
I just think that component should be there because it's one of the 12, you know what I mean, that it said, hey, here's a deficiency.
Good point. So again, this is the initial run at it, and again, it is, as Michelle said, it is a working document. It changes pretty much daily. And we will try to find the time in October that we can sit down and hash this out for a couple, 2-3 hours to see where we go.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Next, we have the 22 state legislative requests.
In the first work session of October, I can't remember what day it is, October 5th, Paul Fry and Jim Kirchhoff are gonna be here to talk about the community coalition, and they're gonna look first for your all support of being involved in the community coalition again, and then also on some of the projects that they're gonna be in Annapolis with the lobbyists advocating for. What we did was as a management team, discuss legislative topics that we are interested in pursuing this year in the upcoming 2022 session that would either be part of the community coalition or that we would work directly with Senator Cordman, Delegate Cham to try to get accomplished for us. They have not seen this yet. They know some of the things on here, but they have not. They've not been briefed on this yet because we want to make sure that you all saw it, and then I will start communications with them on the ones that you feel are good to move forward with. First one would be, I'm sorry it's so small, a mandate for the county to meet, explain, discuss yearly the tax differential calculation with Washington County municipalities. Right now, that is not a requirement. It is if they want to. I think, like in many other counties in Maryland, it should be a mandate that they do come in to all of us and provide us this information. Allow for municipal taxing authority notification of real property assessment appeals at all levels of the appeals process. Allow for opportunity for municipalities to review the appeal documentation. Right now, we only get notified when a real property appeal is going before the second level of the appeal process, which is the PTAB, the local PTAB board. And that was only after Michelle and I asked that we be notified when that was gonna happen. Otherwise, the first time we find out that a property has been appealed and received a reduction in their assessment is when we get the adjustment notice from assessments and taxation, and we have to decrease that bill amount and reimburse if that tax was already paid. We would just like to find some mechanism to where we could at least be notified if when it goes into the first level of an appeal, which is an administrative process. For example, we had a large development here, a large shopping center here in Hagerstown that went through the first appeal, and their assessment dropped, Michelle, almost $10 million.
It was significant. It changes their enterprise zone tax credit that they already received, and we're still having to give them a refund.
Right.
It's-
And again, if it wasn't because Michelle has developed such a good relationship with the local SDAT, there would be no reason for us to know that until we get slapped with a assessment notice. So trying to find some mechanism to help with that. And of course, that wouldn't affect just us, it would affect everybody. Legislation to establish a set formula that allows for fair level funding of Washington County fire companies, including the city companies. This would be something similar along to the legislation for tax differential and tax set-offs for those that have them, that would come up with some set formula that would be legislated and fair to all, different than what it is now. Yep,
You mean, just to be clear, Washington County volunteer fire?
yes, yes.
I could just see them reading that and saying we are.
No, it's volunteer, yes. State bonds, bill financing for portion or all of the possible sportsplex indoor facility in Hagerstown. That would be something we could discuss as a group and determine, once we get a final, number on what that amount would be, whether we go for all of it or whether we go for some of it, depending on how the financing looks. I think this is a good opportunity to put in for this. I think we'd get support for it. I know the Community Coalition already has it on their listing of projects to support in Annapolis this year. Now it's just a matter of what the ask would be. Legislation to remove or decrease the restriction capacity at our wastewater treatment plant. That one, Kellen, I don't know if you want to come up and talk about that one a little bit, because that might be new. I know Councilmember Martinez has not got the experience yet, the trials and tribulations of the wastewater treatment plant.
Our treatment plant is rated at 8 MGD right now. Its nutrient loading limits are based on the 8 MGD flow rate capacity.
Where are we at on an average?
Right around 6, I believe. Last year was, 5.9, something like that. We'd like to go to 10 if we can, and right now, there's some limitations, small limitations at the treatment plant that we could overcome to get to 10 pretty easily, but they do not want to, they cap the load at the 8, the nutrient phosphorus limits.
This would just make it easier legally to be able to increase the capacity.
Right. Yeah.
Which we can't do now.
Right, we're at 8.
We're at
We
8,
can't-
and that's
we're
where
at-
we're
We
set
wanted to
at.
go to 10.5 at one point.
Right, 10 or 10, 10 and a half.
Yeah, we
You're
wanted to go to
correct.
10.5 one point.
Right.
But we did the BNR, we did the ENR, so we've gotten down to the .03 limits, right?
3 and .3, right.
Yeah, and so,
But those are the limits of technology essentially.
Right, yeah, I get that.
So to
and
get to
that's-
10, we can't go, we can't meet those limits.
Yeah, but the eight, it's my
At
understanding
10.
the eight's based on that arbitrary figure of your 2035 growth potential. In other words, they're looking at it and
Okay.
saying, hey, they set you at 2035. So every community was supposed to say, hey, here's where we think we're gonna be in 2035, and everybody sent their numbers in, and they said, okay, that's where you're locked in, right? And now the MD is hard pressed to change it for anybody, because if anybody, first person they do it for, they're gonna go, okay, we
And
didn't
to
really
do
mean
for
the
everybody
20.
else, right?
I get the argument. The other argument is, we're gonna do that anyway. In other words, we're gonna get there, whether it's 2028, 2032, 2035, we're gonna get to that figure above 8 million, and they're gonna have to accept it regardless.
Yeah,
Because we're not treating it any differently or any less, we're doing actually more than what other jurisdictions aren't being held to the BNR standards. I mean, there's only 66 of them that are, held to that requirement. The rest aren't held to that. I agree with you.
I
Okay,
mean,
so
unless
we're in
they're
for
new trade
legislation
trade.
to remove or decrease the
Yes.
restriction, yeah.
Next.
Yeah, that's-
I'm with you, man.
That's why I
I'm
had
like,
Kellen come up.
gosh,
Yeah.
oh my goodness.
I like this subject.
Real.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hang on, there might be something else.
Oh,
But since Kellen hasn't got sit up here much, he can sit there.
thanks for putting me on the spot.
That's all right. I told Nancy I'd take care of you while she was gone, so there you go. Requirement, and I don't have anybody here to talk on this, Kathy's not here today. Requirement to counties to have a growth element in comprehensive plans with the same criteria demanded of municipalities. That was Kathy's biggest, thing she'd like to see happen. Future exemption of city residents for any stormwater fee that may be generated by the county. This would apply to any municipality that charges a stormwater fee. We think at some point the county is gonna have to charge a stormwater fee, but this would kind of be like double taxation, where we don't want to have, being that our citizens already pay a stormwater fee, that they would also have to pay a county stormwater fee.
Although technically, right now, some of the arguments that we've had, as you know, or that our citizens have had, is that this fee, they're already also paying taxes to the county since they're not charging a separate fee, the assumption is the county's covering it from their tax base. So if they're paying county taxes to do the county stormwater, why are we paying city stormwater fee for doing the same thing, in the same place where they live here in the city? So
Because the county's not paying any of those fees, that's why.
That's all
I mean,
predicated.
this could
if
end up
county
like the
should ever-
excise tax where they adopt it and ours becomes,
Right.
yeah, null
Right.
and void.
Increased flexibility and allowing municipality to take title over a vacant blighted property regardless of tax status. Kind of talked about that today. Baltimore City seems to have the monopoly on flexibility when it comes to this type of activity. We just like to be able to utilize what they do.
And some counties have some greater authority. Their authority is more on the foreclosure side of when
Right.
they can seize a property versus what a
Right.
municipality can.
And last, but not least, Medicaid reimbursement disparities for CRS. That was the mayor's, to add in, I'll let her talk a little bit about that one.
So, for transport, for Medicaid, it's only $100 reimbursement. And that's not comparable to other states around us. So I know last year they have advocated for an increase in that. I think that we should join in advocating for an increase in that, because quite frankly, private insurance is significantly higher. And the majority of calls that are being transported from the city of Hagerstown, I think around 80% of them are Medicaid. So they're losing a significant amount of money, because $100 doesn't cost the amount that it takes to remove the ambulance from CRS.
What's
to
the
begin
average
with.
of the states around us for their Medicaid reimbursement?
I'm sorry?
What's the average for the states around us?
Like between 250 and 300. So still
Not much,
not great,
but-
still, but it's significantly
It's triple,
higher.
yeah.
Yeah. So I know that Court Meinelschmidt led that charge last year, and there has been interest in it, but I think it's something that we should help advocate for.
So those are what staff came up with. As I said, Paul and Jim will be here October 5th. Talk about the Community Coalition. If you have anything you all would like to add, we've got the legislative delegation meeting in November out at HCC. That's still on. We'd be able to address some of these with them. These are the only thing really up here that I think is really a community coalition one that might make that would probably make the grade would be the indoor sports facility financing, and then, like I said, that's already there now. It would just be a matter of what the ask would be. The rest of these, I think, were probably more individual, not countywide issues, although for the municipalities, I think some of these would have some significance for them that they would want, potentially through MML, to have these addressed too, because we can use the lobbyist down there. I can't remember her name. It used to be Candace Donahoe. She could represent us down there on this. So if you have anything you want me to add to this, let me know. We can prepare something for the legislative session in November, and then you'll hear Paul and Jim out in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you, Kellen.
Yep,
Good
no
job, buddy.
problem.
I'll tell Nancy.
You got all three. You did.
A little bit, kind of just hit me off guard.
Use the ice cream.
We're gonna move the mayor and city council goals and mission statement to October.
Okay.
Sorry. City administrator.
Just a couple of things. Big weekend in Hagerstown, especially Friday night. It's gonna be a lot of stuff going on, so please be patient with the traffic and the parking situation. Thunder in the Square is going on Washington Street and on both the Potomacs, north and south. Imagine Hagerstown is going on. The Woodshedders and Rudy and the Bluefish. Haven't seen Rudy and the Bluefish for quite a while, so it'd be good that they're in University Plaza for Imagine Hagerstown. I think that starts at 5. And then also adding to the traffic, Ron White is at the Maryland Theater for 2 shows this weekend, so it's going to be a pretty busy time. Plenty of parking, UD deck, AD deck, central lot, market lot. So come downtown and you'll find something to do, no doubt about it. That's all for me.
Keisha.
Nothing.
Kristen.
Nothing tonight.
All right, well, I have a whole host of things. I just wanted to shout out Parks and Rec Department for City Park Fall Fest. I was there this weekend, and when I went through the museum gates, they had already clocked 1,000 people, and it was only about 12:45. So it's a pretty big turnout on that day. Congratulations to Veterans Restoration LLC and the Ice Cream Shop, who both had ribbon cuttings this week, and to the museum for their 90th anniversary. And this Saturday, adding to the amount of festivities that are happening in downtown, this Saturday at noon at University Plaza is the Washington Goes Purple Recovery Walk. We have Tony Hoffman coming to speak, and then we're gonna walk around town and celebrate recovery. So I hope everyone joins us, and with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you. Good Saturday at noon. Madam Mayor, Saturday at noon.
I've
Yeah.
just turned everybody at the county against me now.
Cottage food business.
Huh?
That's the legislative request.
I love it.
I want to change the law on cottage food business.
What do you mean by that?
Cottage food.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, joined this evening by City Administrator Scott Nicewarner. Thanks for spending some time.
You bet, Wes. Thank you.
It's been a little time since we had a chance
It
to
has.
talk following one of these meetings. I'm getting all choked up here for a second.
I would say you appreciate it that much?
Yeah, I am. It's getting to me right here, right here. Actually, I thought it was kind of an interesting meeting in that there were a lot of topics to bring before mayor and council to really get their input, because these are some important times here, especially when we talk. Let's start with the American Rescue Plan Act funding. That is something that is a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. Actually, I think I've heard you say that a number of times, just because, we get this first allocation of $10.2 million, yet the restrictions and the guidelines are such that you really have to be creative in a lot of ways to figure out how you can use that money. Now it's been defined a little bit more, but then we put it out there before mayor and council after some due diligence is done on the other side, with the mayor being part of some of those meetings. So tell me where we kind of stand right now with that after the meeting tonight. We'll come back and talk about these things some more next month, but where do you feel we are right now?
Well, I think we're at a starting point. We have to start somewhere, and I think initially we had to develop a philosophy of what we were looking to achieve through the use of this money, because it's transformative, the amount of money that that we're getting over 2 years. And that comes with a pretty large responsibility that we are to spend it in the way that is going to impact our citizens the most, in a positive way, obviously. So there are many routes we could go with this. We could have put it all towards infrastructure, but which some places are doing. However, we felt, based upon the community survey results that we got back, based upon what we see every day to some extent in Hagerstown, and what we hear some of the social agencies are experiencing in Hagerstown, that they think they would be able to make a difference if they only had funding to do this or this or this. We felt we needed to strike a balance and look to not only be transformative with some of our infrastructure needs, especially on the wet water, wastewater side, with some needs on some pump stations that we desperately need to fund, but also on some of these chronic behavioral health situations that need addressed here in Hagerstown. And let's just be realistic. Everyone sees them, and perception is reality. And in this case, there is some true reality to the fact that we have folks out there that need help. And I think we would be remiss as a local government if we didn't look to provide some funding to agencies. For example, the 24-hour mobile crisis unit is in desperate need in this community. Temporary emergency housing and emergency crisis treatment is absolutely necessary in this community, and those are our projects that I think we could help with, and those are going to be, from a staff perspective, what I'm going to advocate when we look this over in more detail in October. I'm going to advocate that we try to put some significant money to.
From a philosophical standpoint, how much of a responsibility is it for the government to get involved with some of the things that you're talking about? I mean, clearly, we do see them on a daily basis, and it's something that we're dealing with on a daily basis, and we wish that there were solutions. But just from your point of view, philosophically, how much can or should government do to help in those instances?
Man, you are really trying to get me in trouble with this.
No, I'm really not. I'm trying to pick your brain.
It's a great question, and I would say, for a local government, where are you going to go? Where else are you going to go?
Yeah, what are the other options?
What are the other options? Fundraising, nonprofits fundraising. You're not going to be able to make as much of a dent into it. In this day and age, with foundations, those kind of things, not that we can provide, billions of dollars like the federal government can. I actually do think, and I think the government has shown that they are willing to put money out there to help fund these initiatives. But on a local level, services, the majority of services that are provided to any individual primarily come from local government. So we either have to provide it or we have to find somebody to provide it.
Right, and I think too, all of a sudden this money coming our way, we have an opportunity to be part of that
Right.
solution.
Right.
Which is certainly, the way that I think we're viewing this as
Yeah.
a city right now with a lot of those projects that, show up
Yeah.
on that list potentially.
I mean, I wish it had been 200 million.
Yeah.
To an extent, because 20.4 million over 2 years is a lot of money, no doubt. But as you can see, once we got from the community survey, and then once we started meeting with individual stakeholders through the Homeless Coalition, we found that that money for what these agencies need to do to provide help for the clients that come into there, it's not as much as we think it's going to be.
When we talk about money, we certainly talk about the fact that, we are coming off a year where it was a very trying year, and this was talked about a little bit during the meeting tonight in terms of those who were unable to get the normal amount of money or funding that they would normally get.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that ARPA money, we can certainly help in that respect. Now, on the other side of it, it's kind of a push and pull to some degree, because then we also talk about the legislative session coming up and some of the asks that we'll have there that will go to Annapolis. And as you said at the end of the meeting, maybe only one of those in the end is the one that is truly one that will come back to us. But at the same time, what is, and I keep going back to what is the responsibility, but
Yeah.
what's the responsibility of the city and your role in presenting these to, Paul Fry and Jim Kirchwell when they come in to potentially take some of these concerns to Annapolis on behalf of the citizens of Hagerstown?
Well, what their part of it is going to be is that they are the local leaders for the Community Coalition, in which that is a group that hires a lobbyist that advocates on the Community Coalitions, and the Community Coalition is made up of many stakeholders in the county, the college, the governments, all the colleges, all the municipalities, the Chamber of Commerce members. It's much bigger than
broader.
just government,
Right, yeah.
So that's what they would look to advocate for.
Okay.
We are fortunate that we have a very good relationship with Senator Quarterman and with Delegate Cham here at the city, and Delegate Cham is our city delegate. Most of these would really fall more into their purview to legislate if they felt it was I guess complementary to their political belief. We can only ask that they legislate on certain things. We can't make them do it. But certainly they will do it if they can. If they can't, they always provide a reason as to why it won't work. I don't think there was anything on that list, and Eric took the list down. I was going to cheat and look at it, but I don't think there was anything on the list that is out of the ordinary or that's not already happening in some other county in the state. But again, the problem we have in Western Maryland is that we are so unlike the rest of the state, downstate. We are more like the Eastern Panhandle, South Central Pennsylvania, not only in our makeup, but in the political beliefs that are the majority in these areas, which makes it difficult for us in Annapolis because we are politically so different of a makeup than what they are in the metro, D.C.,
Yeah.
Baltimore area, even though D.C. is not Maryland, obviously, but Montgomery,
Right,
Prince George's,
yeah.
Charles, those counties.
And that's where so much of that comes from, and then
It's
we
where
have to abide by it.
95% of it comes from.
It's like the same thing with the police reform.
Absolutely.
It was meant basically for that, yet
Absolutely.
it applies to everyone else.
Absolutely, and again, we have been extremely fortunate with the administration in Annapolis, with Governor Hogan, being a Republican, but then also with Congressman Trone on the national level being a Democrat. The attention that they have paid and the things we've been able to get accomplished out here in Western Maryland, that they have helped initiate through the community leadership and through the delegations of the Western Maryland counties. So I don't think there was anything on there that was a out of line, I would say.
No.
But again, I think these are things that as a municipality, I think not only for Hagerstown, but I think a couple of the items up there, all the municipalities in Washington County would benefit from and should have.
Yeah, and certainly worthy of discussion at
Sure.
the very least, and
Sure.
where it goes from there is, anyone's guess, but at least you
Absolutely.
get that out there.
Yep.
And have it discussed. And speaking of discussions, one of the initiatives that's been taking place recently is the Operation Take Back, which is kind of just getting off the ground,
Yep.
starting with one community, and we'll sort of move from there based on community ask and the back and forth between the
Yep.
community and staff here at the city. But I thought, to me, it was a little bit interesting in the discussion having to do with blight. Earlier this evening, the first item that Paul Folk addressed,
Yeah.
which was the blight and the parcel inventory.
Right.
And we're talking about the owner occupied and the rental properties there specifically. And the interesting thing to me was that Paul made his presentation, and then there was some, I want to say, some disagreement from council members in terms of the enforcement mechanism.
Right.
And I think if I was reading it right, Paul said at one point, well, this is what we're able to do to sort of steer people in the direction of doing what we want them to do in the end. I mean, we start with education. We let them know, hey, here are the issues. And from there, it's kind of up to you to comply.
Right.
And do that within a certain period of time.
Right.
And it seemed like everyone was okay with that, but then when it gets to the enforcement mechanism, it's like, well, that's too heavy-handed. But my question to you is, don't you have to have something at the end of that sort of puts people in a position where they need to do those things that have sort of been identified on their property? And I get it. Hey, I'm a homeowner too,
Yeah.
and I know there are things that I let go at times. And I talked to Kathy Marr about this last week. Here, there are those things that kind of slip through the cracks, or those things you think, well, okay, I can let this go. But I think you made an excellent point in that we're really not talking about some of these things that I think the council members got hung up on, some of those small things.
Right.
We're talking about the larger issues, like you said, that have to do with safety.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are extremely fortunate with Operation Take Back to be working with a community that is invested in their community.
They're completely engaged in
Totally
wanting
engaged
to do
in
better.
it, totally engaged
Yeah.
with it, and should be a model. Not only that area, South Locust, South Cannon, South Mulberry, King, Hager, that area, the entire Bester community area, that is, I wish they should be a model, not only for the rest of the neighborhoods here in this city, but throughout the state, throughout the area. So we're fortunate. And we're fortunate that they were not shy in presenting their thoughts on what they felt needed done in their community. And that's why we felt, the mayor and myself both felt, that if they're showing that much interest, we need to reciprocate as a city government that provides services. And the walk around really opened a lot of eyes through that neighborhood. And like you said, and like I said earlier, this is not to be a punitive exercise. We are not out to find how many non-owner or owner-occupieds we can find. What we are out for is to find those situations where there are life safety issues, where someone could get hurt or killed if that property is not taken care of. And by the same token, I think I said, talking about Operation Take Back, we do not want to do this, but say, go figure out how you're going to pay for it. We need to come up with a mechanism, and I still feel that is a definite use of ARPA money, if not some of the blight money that we should be getting from the government, to be able to say, hey, I don't care what your, well, we would have to put some restriction on it, but I don't care what your situation is. If you have a roof about to collapse, or you have a leaky roof that you can't sleep during a rainstorm because you're getting soaking wet, or you have a porch that is about to come down on top of you, we need to be able to help you with that. Whether it be through matching funds, whether it be an 80-20, 70-30, whatever it could be. That's what we're looking to do. We're not going to go out and look at, oh my goodness, your paint's peeling off your one beam on your house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's $500 fine.
Right.
That is not what this is about. It's the life safety aspect of it. And trust me, my house would probably be number one on the list in the South End community for code violations when it came to, I got a broken shutter, my porch needs painted, but that's secondary to if I live in a house with a couple kids and I got a support of my front porch and it's about ready to collapse.
Yeah.
That needs fixed.
Right.
And we need to be available to direct them either where they can go to get that help or help them actually get it done.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we bring planning and code administration into it, people are like, well, this is just some sort of gotcha campaign, but that is not what it is. This is education, helping people identify
Right.
maybe some of those things that they
Right.
have overlooked, saying, hey, maybe I should pay a little more attention to that. It could turn into this. That could be a
Right.
disaster. But my part of this was I was interested because, we've heard from everyone. We've heard assurances from council members, from staff, from the community. You look at the community the feedback survey,
Right.
people talking about, we need to get rid of blight. We can't have this. And
Right.
then when we have a discussion like this, in the end, don't want to necessarily enforce at the other end of this. But at the same time, I think I can speak for you here, we don't want to be taking
No.
our residents to court. We
No.
don't want to be fining our residents.
No.
We want, the overall part of this is, we want them, just like the community that we talked about earlier, to take pride and to take ownership of the
Right.
community and do these things that just, when it looks better,
Right.
it's just better for everyone.
And that is the power of the neighborhood first groups that we have. Those that are active, those that aren't active. This is the power that you could have.
Yeah.
In trying to create that community, recreate the community pride, the community involvement. Have a community garbage pickup, trash pickup, and pick stuff, pick some of the trash up and the litter off the street. Unfortunately, there is no way that people are never going to litter. That's just going to happen. There's no way that a trash truck coming down South Locust Street is ever going to get 100% of the trash in the back of that truck.
Yeah.
But that's okay. if you have a community that's involved, or a homeowner, looks out in front and sees a milk carton, so just pick it up and put it in the trash. That's all, it's that easy.
Right.
We're not asking you to take a shovel and start, hauling stuff to the dump.
No.
This is basic stuff.
Yeah.
And one thing I tried to, and I think there are opportunities with this, especially in these communities, because it's just the way Hagerstown is built. With the way that housing was built on top, houses are on top of each other and they're connected and along complete city blocks.
Yep.
And there's just not that access to the rear of the property. If we could look at some of these areas and see if we could do a trash pickup on an alley with a smaller truck. I know the big trucks Waste Management uses won't be able to make it through some of the alleys, but come up with some other alternative to that trash pickup. I think that would help. I think that would help tremendously. Just some of these residents just don't have any place to put their they just don't have a place to put their cans, and certainly the last thing we're going to do is fine them for something that they can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's-
that I'm afraid that was kind of getting lost in the minutia of some of the discussion, but it's all about the one thing in that community survey was trash. Why is there so much trash laying around Hagerstown? That's a great question. For one, trash is going to happen, litter is going to happen, and for two, there are some people that just don't care, driving down the street, throwing the wrapper out of the car. They don't care.
And we're never
And
going
we're never
to
going to be able to do
Yeah.
anything about that either.
Yeah.
So at some point, we have to take it in our own hands, and if we're walking down the street and we see a wrapper, pick it up, put it in the garbage.
Yeah.
Easy as that.
Yeah, it really, it really is
really
that
is.
simple. So, yeah, that's basically everything I had. Anything else that?
It's just just to make sure that people are aware that this ARPA money is we have to be good stewards of this money. One of the concerns was that you can't give this type of money to a municipality because they'll waste it or they'll spend it on something that they don't need or frivolous or they'll use this money to compensate for the poor spending habits they've had in the past. We have to make sure that first of all, I don't believe this city, as long as I've been here, has had poor spending habits in the past. I don't think we've had the budgets to be able to do that with in the first place. But second of all, I think if we ever expect to be in a position again where we can be held accountable or we can be provided with funding from governments, instead of having a state do it, or instead of having, especially really instead of having a state do it, manage these funds and then trickle them down to the county or to the city. We have to show we can do this right.
Right.
We're not in a real big hurry with this. We have till 2025, but we have some issues that we need to address now. And behavioral health, in my opinion, is number one.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we have to deal with is the food deserts that we have existing in this city. We need to look at ways to fix that. The social issues, social concerns we have here, whether it be with homeless or drug addiction, are real here.
Yeah.
And we need to look at how we can use some of this money to help in that effort. The last thing, the thing I'll end with here, Wes, is because I could talk forever on this, but we need to make sure this money that's being given out, 10.2 and 10.2, that's being used, not given out, but being used, is one time. We don't have this every year until eternity. The one thing that we have asked anyone that we've talked to about, whether it be a social agency, a nonprofit, whatever, is that you get whatever funding you get, you have to find a way to sustain it in the future. Because if you get this money for a project and you cannot sustain it, we have just wasted that money.
Yeah.
And we can, and again, that goes back to where, it was all in good intentions, but there was no plan to sustain it into the future. It has to be sustainable. I think we've got some good folks that run nonprofits around here that are going to be able to do that, that have the community in mind. But still, that has to be something we are continually asking ourselves. How do we sustain the ability to maintain these programs? And if we can do that, we'll be fine.
And I think just the fact that you and the staff are so cognizant of that going in, I mean, it's not like you're just handing this money out. I mean, 34 different requests potentially, or projects right there
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the beginning.
yeah.
So obviously, a lot of work's been done
And
already.
they were 60. I mean, it was 60.
Yeah.
We cut it in half.
Right.
But yeah, and it is. It's a gift and a curse.
Yeah.
Somebody's not going to be happy, and we're going to miss things. You know, Councilman Alshire had some good ideas, and got his point on that it shouldn't look like that certain individual nonprofits are you know, that it was there, or that it was council that was directing it. We just wanted to do that, so we just say we didn't sit in a room and say, hey, let's spend $1 million on, you know, foosball table for the council chambers
Yeah.
or something, you know, those kind of things.
You were coming up with something that
there was
identified.
there was
who
something
it
that was
you needed.
identified, and there was
Yeah.
a source
Yes.
to where the idea
Right.
or the project came from, and we'll fix it up. But it's going to take hours of discussion, I think, to make sure. At least I hope it does, because this is, like I said, we need to be held accountable. We will be held accountable for this, as Michelle Hepburn said. The government is holding us accountable, and we can't screw it up, because we'll never see it again.
Yeah, this has a ripple effect
Sure.
for years to come.
Yep.
So, yeah, well, thanks for your time. I certainly appreciate
You
it.
bet, you bet.
For City Administrator Scott Nicewarner, I'm Wes Decker. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining me this time on Council Wrap. See you next time on the city's cable channel and the city's social media platforms. Till then, so long.